you can teach anybody anything. I can teach them any skill set. I can't teach somebody that drive and ambition and passion and attention to detail. That you can't teach.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Colbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Colbert, and today we have a very special episode for you. In an industry that continues to evolve, it's essential to pause and celebrate the leaders who are driving that change. That's why today we are spotlighting the incredible women who are shaping the future of facilities, operations, and supply chain management. We've curated the most powerful moments from our recent conversations with 6 phenomenal leaders: Agata Gajewska, Tatiana Blankenship, Gretchen Catlin, Katie Huard, Kim Doherty, and Emily Gianola. These women bring a wealth of knowledge, a fresh perspective, and a people-first approach to their work. From Agata's insights on a hospitality mindset to Tatiana's no assholes rule for building a positive culture and Katie's razor-sharp strategies for supply chain, this episode is a testament to their impact. You'll hear how they lead with empathy, solve problems with creativity, and mentor the next generation. So get ready to be inspired. You've gone from compliance and regulatory to a huge college, several campuses. What's been your biggest lesson learned on that journey?
I think throughout that journey, my biggest lesson learned is that facility leadership is ultimately about people, not just the buildings.
I love that. So what does that mean to you? How would you explain that?
So as you mentioned, I started out early in my career doing compliance, regulatory compliance, and risk management. And I think that early on, I was really focused on mastering those technical skills of budgets, projects, timelines, meeting those regulatory compliance areas. And while all of those are important, they're just not enough on their own. So over time, I realized that the heart of building trust is working with your team and your campus and your partners and the people that you serve. So it's not just meeting those requirements, that how do you help bring people along the way to understand why those are important, why we should be thinking about them. So it's a lot of shifting from just being technical to helping build relationships.
Now, you have a very large responsibility, like we just noted in the intro. So Howard, can you give us some examples of how you're actually doing that and how you're getting your team to enroll in this thought process as well, or this culture maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So as you mentioned, we're a large public institution in the state of Maine. So we have 7 campuses with over 9 million square feet to manage. And reporting up to me, I have facility directors on each campus that have a dotted line relationship to me, as well as I oversee risk management and safety, strategic procurement, integrated work management, and capital planning and project management. So that all sounds like a lot, and each one of those are different departments that have their own strategic objectives. And I like to think of it similar to I played violin, so I can relate it to an orchestra. So we have our, your string, your bass, and your percussion areas, and they all have their sheet of music to play off of. But if we don't time it right, and if we're not all reading from the same sheet of music, then things don't align, the music doesn't sound right. So I like to think of my role as kind of being the conductor and helping make sure that we're all working together in sync to make sure that we're really creating an atmosphere that's safe and that we're helping each institution further their mission to educate and further research within our state.
You have a no assholes policy. Could you
Absolutely.
tell us about that?
100%. So it's a book, and forgive me, I don't remember the author's name, but there's a book called The No Assholes Rule. So, for example, you have a really highly skilled technician on your team that is, an asset, but very difficult to work with, wants it his or her way all of the time. That is not a reason to keep somebody on staff. If they have technical skills, those skills can be taught to someone else. It is not worth losing your team's cohesion because somebody can't play nice in the sandbox. When I hear things like, it's my building and it's my way or the highway, or we've never done it like that, those are kind of red flags that pop up for me. Because you can't, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to train humility, and you can always train technical skills to somebody. So throughout my career, I've been kindly accused of being too nice, or I didn't give somebody hell when they deserved it, and I think that I take that feedback, and I've learned a lot how to be more assertive throughout my career. But I've also learned that kindness and empathy gets you a lot farther at 2 a.m. when you need a vendor out. They're gonna want to come out to your facility if you have a good relationship with them.
Well, if I could, Tatiana, just jump back on, you noted the person that might say it's my building or it's always been done this way.
Mhm.
So, and you could always teach technical skills, but not that empathy or that humility. So how have you, like, of course, no names, right? But how have you dealt with that, and have people turned over as a result of that? And what was the other side of that?
Yeah, I mean, and so early in my career there, when I first became a facility manager, I ascribed to the mantra, hire slowly and fire quickly. And so there have been a couple of instances where we've had to let people go for, I guess, not being a team player is the nicest way without going into details. That somebody who, if I had a team of 15 guys and 2 women, and if I hear every day about the same person coming from half of the team, then I know that there's a problem. And so
Mhm.
it's uh, addressing it quickly and with candid conversations. And then if that doesn't work, then you really, they may need to find a good fit somewhere else.
Yep, that's phenomenal. Can you told me a story, one of the times we talked about someone who was in one part of the building or the business, and you
Mhm.
saw some raw talent, right? And I think it was questioned, if I'm remembering that correctly, and now they're
Mhm.
flourishing. You walk us through that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm known here at Blount as, a serial poacher. I love to,
Mhm.
when I have someone that I work cross-functionally with, whether directly or my team does, and I see that they're reactive and responsive, and they're seeing things before they happen and calling things out. You start to see those skills, and you're like, "Ugh, do I leave them there and I have them as an asset to lean on when I need to, or do I kind of pull them into the fold and bring them under the procurement umbrella and utilize that talent and grow it and flourish it?" So there's one individual who was kind of working in the warehouse environment, but super responsive any day, any time, didn't matter, any crazy request. Also just kind of seeing things in not even in their scope of responsibility and just calling them out and saying, "Hey, like this is going on. This doesn't seem right. That seems out of place." And just always thinking 5 steps ahead and making things easier. Like, "Hey, why do we do this the long way? Like I could probably just do it this way and it's much faster." So I had, run the crazy idea of kind of bringing her to the procurement team and on the admin side of the house. And we always talk about the ops and the admin side. And they were like, "Are you sure?" She like works in the warehouse. It's a lot of, it's a different environment to bring, come into admin, and it's going to take a lot of work, and the computer skills and the software skills." And I said, You can teach anybody anything. I can teach them any skill set. I can't teach somebody that drive and ambition and passion and attention to detail that you can't teach. I
I
I would
think
take
that's the one thing sorry to interrupt you, but the mindset thing, it sounds like that person has an amazing mindset. They
yeah,
drive, obviously.
oh my god. If I could clone her, I would make 100 of her and we would take over the world, but different story for another day. So we brought her onto the admin side when a position opened up, and it was like everything you threw at her, she just found another way to do it. If she didn't know how to do it, you had to show her once, and she kind of took it on and then expanded upon it. She's now since moved on from procurement, and she's in, another segment of supply chain, and she's absolutely killing it over there because now she's taken what she knew in the warehouse, what she knew in procurement, and now in her new role, she's just kind of digging into everything and really asking a lot of the good questions of people like, why do we do it that way? That doesn't make any sense. And she's teaching a lot of those kind of old school processes, the faster, more efficient way of doing things. And, it's amazing to see that upward mobility for her. And like the sky is the limits, because if she just stays hungry and keeps asking all those questions, she's just continue. And that's really where, looking at who's doing the hard work, who's dedicated. It's not always the who's here first and who's here last, throughout the day. It's who's actually putting the hard work in and asking the tough questions, and how do you just keep giving them the platform to do that?
You spoke briefly in another conversation we had about pairing up in rounds. I think it was based
Yes,
upon experience too. I think that's awesome. I'd love to talk about it a bit.
absolutely. So this kind of falls under the category of the humility, the leading by example, management by walking around. And by nature, I have to say I'm definitely an introvert. It is I have to sort of turn it on during the workday if I'm serving clients. But I find it really important that you pair people who are more veteran with a piece of equipment with new people. At the beginning of my work, oftentimes it was me that was being paired up with all the technicians so that I could learn the facility. So pairing up people on rounds, even having a new person do the round, switching off monthly so that you have fresh sets of eyes, looking at all of your equipment. Uh, One of the things that I found really valuable was we would have a weekly facilities team meeting, and once a month we would use that time to do kind of a go look see. And so everybody would gather at the boiler, and the technician would go through his or her pain points for the boiler, how often they do PMs. We sort of had a set template that each person would use, and so by the end of the year, you pick a different utility every month, including things like janitorial, pest control, um, just building envelope painting, those kinds of things. You would go through and understand what it takes to keep that piece of equipment or system functional throughout the year, how the rest of the team can jump in and help if something goes wrong, and then what that person needs. And the good part about that is whoever is teaching gets experience in training their colleagues, and then they also feel heard. They feel like their pain points have been kind of exposed, and now management knows kind of what's going on with their system.
No, it's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
So you're also a member or closely affiliated with IFMA. And
Yes.
I think I shared with you that our local chapter leadership members have been kind enough to come on the show. And it's what an amazing organization. And we try
Yes.
to do as much with them as we can.
Thank you.
And I think you briefly shared that there was some type of a site visit or something you wanted to give a shout out.
Sure. So I am currently serving as the board vice president for the Greater Triangle chapter of IFMA. So that Greater Triangle is Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area. And we had just the pleasure of being able to go on a tour of a company called Bandwidth. And I'm going to give a shameless shout out to Sean Hobson, who is the facilities manager over there. And just such a great idea. So they instituted a kind of a new sound barrier that they have on their cubicles. And one thing that he mentioned was anytime they make a big change, so whether it's seating arrangements, or you're changing the type of ice machine or coffee maker, or something that people tend to complain about, right? You say in your communication, we're going to do this change and you're going to live with it for 30 days, and we'll reevaluate after 30 days. And please don't put any work orders in from now until that 30-day expiration date. And I just thought it was such an ingenious way of change management, because oftentimes people will complain right away that they don't like this change. But if they know they have, okay, I have to live with this for 30 days. And after that, if I want to change it, then I can go and ask for it to be changed. So I thought that was just brilliant, and I'm going to steal it.
Same. Yep.
Yep.
Well, you get used to it, right? You
do.
get used to people inherently don't like change.
Yeah.
Most people don't. So I love that. Great.
Yeah.
Good
Yes,
on him.
I've definitely had some pain points trying to change the shape of ice from cube ice to chewy ice, not chewy ice. Right.
So there may be more there's always a lot more for us to cover. What are we chatted about that we didn't hit on yet, Tatiana?
I think one of the things from an obstacle standpoint that's really helped me is to know your team. So it's called a 5x5 exercise, and so you sit with your technicians. Your direct reports generally is how I've done it, and you understand, how do you like to do your job? What do you like it in? Do you like a noisy environment? Do you like a quiet environment? And you ask a series of questions of your team to get to know them, and the facility manager can pick the questions. So for me, it's always, are you better alone and in a group? Do you tend to have a plan before you execute, or do you just like to go? So you figure out questions to ask your team, and then you gather and you write all those down. And then the most important part is that you post them. So we would have, each of the team members had basically a sign on their cube wall that said, do, don't, and then some little comments. And so I knew if I wanted to go to, John Doe over here and he doesn't like being ambushed, that I'm going to set up a time on his calendar instead of just walking over to his cube and saying, hey, what's up? Because he wants some time to think about it. And so someone else really likes just spur of the moment conversations. And so I can feel free to walk over and say, hey, give me an update on the chiller. And they won't bat an eye on it. And so that, knowing your team and having that written down and shared somewhere, I think goes a long way to preventing, I guess, drama and hard feelings in the team.
You talked about a previous employer and a system that you used there, whether you want to name the system or not. Maybe what worked so well with that one?
So I love the name, so I'm going to go with it. It was called, when I was at Vertex, it was called VBay. So it was a little knockoff of eBay, and I loved it because it was a system that anytime there was a lab asset that nobody needed, they could put it into this virtual eBay, and then the concept was that it would inform the whole portfolio of the labs, right? So that could be the UK facility, the San Diego facility, whatever, to say, hey, we have a centrifuge, or we have a mass spec, or we have an HPLC, or whatever that is no longer being utilized. Is there anybody else in the so then that was part of the process that we were trying to build, was before you can buy a new centrifuge or a new mass spec, you have to go into this catalog and say, do we have one somewhere that isn't being utilized? That, here's the thing, it's not saying that you're going to get somebody's 14-year-old whatever, but there's also trade-in value to that. So you could go into this virtual catalog and say, hey, there's a centrifuge on there that nobody's using. I talked to the vendor and they said they'll give me, $10,000 in trade for that centrifuge. I'm going to take that trade. We're going to get rid of the old centrifuge and I'm going to get a new one with a discount. And I think there's such value to that. Is a lot of times global sites, or even just, campus sites, large sites, they don't see that it's my equipment, it's chemistry's equipment, it's biology's equipment, it's each group has their own equipment. When they're done using it, either it's going to sit on a bench until they're ready to use it for the credit. They don't see the bigger picture. They don't see that this is the company's equipment. This is the company's P&L. That's where that has to come from. It's kind of breaking down those groups, even with the departmental budgets, right? If something isn't being used, I'm not saying we're going to ship a centrifuge to the UK, because that's probably not cost effective, right? But at the same time, there's enough big vendors out there that would say, you know what, hey, we can take it out of your Boston site, but give you the discount in the UK or whatever.
That's a brilliant idea. Do you see that being adopted or rolled out nowhere else?
No, I haven't. I love the idea. And I mean, I went from Vertex to a biotech, and they just didn't have that size, but it was always something that in the back of my head with a bigger company, or as we grew, that's where I'd love to take it, because I think there's such value to that, right? And
Sure.
and I don't even know if it has to necessarily maintain within your company walls. I mean, this could be something. I'm part of the LabOps Unite community. I think even within the community, you can say, "Hey, does anybody have any old centrifuges not using anymore? I'd love to see your trade-in value or whatever."
So how do you audit your vendors? Like maybe talk on the systems and how you built them and who does that and how does it all work?
Yeah, so I'm of the kind of mindset right now where I want everything automated. As businesses really look at, the buzzword of AI, it's like, how are you taking the data that you just have readily available to you in every segment of your business and build out an automated process? So for auditing our vendors, we have built out kind of expected, reporting and then actual reporting. And I have my team monitoring that daily. So if there's expected costs and you have a variance that's, you're not gonna be able to go to every single invoice and look at everything. But if you set some parameters around anything above 10% than what we expected, we need to dig into that. If even our own internal freight handling team where they're booking, that we're asking for quotes on freight so we can decide, do we want the vendor to handle the freight? Do we want to handle the freight internally? We'll get a quote and then all of a sudden we'll come back a month later and be like, whoa, why was this double? So it's always challenging what people had, quoted and what you're expecting. So you really have to be diligent about making sure you're tracking what you're expecting to
Mhm.
see and then building out some sort of automated reporting that makes that process much faster. So you're not, sitting there digging through invoices. It's just you're getting an exception report once a week, and those you can go tackle.
Got it. I think you may have just answered this, but maybe there's more to it. Before we jump to manufacturing, what advice would you give other people in your role or teams um, to get ahead of it?
I would say if I could give advice to people is really, it's a mantra that we have around here. It's inspect what you would expect. Um, Always look to see if you're expecting certain results, make sure that's what you're actually getting. And don't go by just the word of, somebody saying, "Yep, that's all set." Yep. No. Find a way to build the check and balance into the process. So you're just getting an exception flag, however methodology that works for you to say, there's supply chain, it's so dynamic and it changes every 20 seconds. You need something that you build out your I'm looking for. Oh my gosh, control tower. Building out control towers is really, you don't need some fancy software to do that. You can figure out a way to know that here's the 5 things that are the most critical that I need to check every single day. And these are my barometers. And if any of these start kind of flagging, then I know I got to start digging into that segment of what I'm managing.
Love it. Now, for those who haven't built out a control tower, could you explain it in just a little bit more?
Sure. So a control tower, there's complex software that you can get that will give you a snapshot of the different segments of business that you're looking at, of orders that are due in, orders that have arrived, your spend, your budget. Um, Basically, if there's stuff in transit, you can take a look at where everything is, and if your inbounds are not going to match your demand, what's your secondary plans? But I've seen control towers built out even just in an Excel spreadsheet that have in feeds from an automated run that happens overnight, and live data's feeding in, and it's just kind of telling you, whoa, hold on, something's not right here. Let's go dig into that.
Yeah.
If a segment of the business, like, we've had instances where our forecasting software will hit a glitch overnight. And prior to a lot of these flags that we built out, it could go on for months where a forecast kind of wasn't updated and you're just chugging along buying stuff and they're like, whoa, we took that forecast out 3 months ago. Why do we have all this inventory? And I'm like, oh my God. So learn from those experiences. And we built in, a nightly check to say, yep, everything ran and everything looks to be what it was the same as yesterday.
You and I spoke, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and you talked about the culture of service in facilities management. I would love to hear you expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's something I have noticed recently, and it was topic of my other conversations that when I started in facilities, the facilities was as a group, as a function, it was just basically behind the scene and dealing with the work orders. That's kind of how the facility group is always seen, kind of behind the scenes, seamless operations, and just talking about work orders or reaching out to facilities only on those topics. I feel that stuff have really shifted, and we're no longer just managing the spaces. granted that our facility group is always on site, it's kind of easier to get that rapport with the client or with the employees that are on site. And we kind of come into with more of like a hospitality mindset. So definitely it's much easier to build a rapport with folks that actually are on site. But it's more of like a lot of soft skill come into place. It's not just only, the hard skills that when we have to manage the properties. Kind of creating the very meaningful people-centric experience that you actually get to bond with the client. So they are more open to coming to you whenever there is an issue or whenever something needs to be adjusted in their favor to make the workspace more comfortable. So I find that kind of change, it's not just facilities are only to fix an issue. It's more of a proactive approach with the client, maybe seeking their advice on what could be improved. But it's less responsive with a building technical issues. It's more so creating somewhat of a relationship and rapport with client. And I think that's kind of two sides of the facility scope now.
No, it's great. I'm taking notes here. And proactive approach versus just reactive. You're ahead of it. You're asking the client for some suggestions on what they may want done or changed. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what types of things do they bring to you?
Yeah, I know it's not always something that we want to hear as feedback, because then maybe necessarily we can't always accommodate all the changes. But for example, snacks in the office. That's very, everyone loves snacks, and that's something that we offer in the office, and it could be such a small thing based on someone's preference for certain small things that throughout the day actually could mean, make a difference. And just the fact that we are willing to listen and be accommodating as much as we obviously can with the realistic expectations. I find that people like the fact that we ask.
Oh, sure.
Temperature, room temperature, lighting, anything of that nature that can definitely make a difference in specific workstation, workplace. We're always willing to open and explore. Do we have to sometimes say no? Of course, but we at least try to accommodate most of their reasonable requests.
And let them down easy if they're not quite reasonable.
That's true. That's another part of facility work.
And so for me, incident investigation is very near and dear to my heart. It's what I'm good at. And then I really enjoy lessons learned as well. So for me, it's always going to be about starting from when the incident occurred, taking the timeline backward from that point. I like to go through, and I'm a huge fan of causal analysis over root cause. I know that if I've got seasoned EHS professionals listening, they understand the Swiss cheese model. And whenever you have a major incident, it's almost always the Swiss cheese model. It's not one thing that occurred, but it's a breakdown of an entire system and all of those holes in that cheese lining up on a magical day for this major incident to occur. And so it's really looking at all of those causal factors and developing a corrective action or a defense mechanism to each causal factor to ensure that we don't produce the same situation again and hurt someone or hurt our environment or anything like that.
This is great. So can you go a little deeper, please, on causal analysis versus root cause analysis? Because many people do use that verbiage, root cause analysis. Can you just unpack that a little bit more, please?
Sure. So I think, and I will say that for EHS professionals, we all understand causal analysis, that it's all of these different things. But I think what the issue is whenever you have people that are not EHS professionals, like your board or your executive leadership team, that doesn't fully, whenever you say root cause, they think that there's one singular cause for that incident occurring. And so everyone gets very fixated on the one thing. Why did that one thing happen? And it's not like that. And so causal analysis is going back through the timeline and seeing where the different failures occurred and what the correct defense mechanisms or PPE or administrative policies, anything that shoulda, coulda, woulda been in place to prevent the incident. So it's not only looking at
where things went wrong and to fix it at that one point, but it's to go back and look at each failure that occurred that led to the incident and assigning, I would say, a corrective action, but I do like defense mechanisms a lot better, because whenever you're looking at, okay, well, then, this operator made this decision. Well, why did they make this decision? Well, our process doesn't tell us specifically what the operator should be doing in this. Okay, well, we need to fix our process here. And so it's administrative controls, it's engineering controls, and you go through each specific factor and assign a corrective action or defense mechanism that should have been in place.
Everybody loves stories, right? So I want to ask you a couple of questions. What's your, let's call it nightmare story with ticketing, and then give us a good story around ticketing, because really everyone's been through both scenarios, right? So what just went so horribly wrong, and what happened? How did it happen? Why did it happen?
So I will say the utilization one around ticketing was one where we found out through utilization that something wasn't being used. And we're all in a room looking at our fleet of really expensive mass specs and going, well, why is this one so low? We don't understand it. And I'm looking in the system, my ticketing system, and I'm going, I don't know. I mean, the last repair ticket we had was about a year ago. It was PM'd. Haven't heard anything. And finally got to the user group and said, hey, so why don't use this one? Because they don't want to get rid of it. They're like, no, you can't pull that from us. But why aren't you using it then? And they're like, well, it just keeps acting up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who'd you tell? I don't have any tickets in my system that say the thing's been wonky. We had a PM on it almost a year ago. Nobody's using it because they don't like it. They don't like it because it's not reliable. It's not reliable. Nobody's opening a ticket. Well, guess what? This thing was also sitting on a $23,000 a year service contract. So we're paying $23,000 a year on an asset that nobody's using because they need it to actually be repaired. And it was crazy because just doing this little project on utilization and saying, where are we with our fleet? Where's your pulse check? That thing would have been riding on a service because I don't know what I don't know, right? I'm not physically going and touching all 47 LCMS systems that we had, right? I'm not touching 108 HPLCs. You're talking about thousands and thousands of assets. You can't expect your lab groups to physically know each and every one of them and know where they are. It's the responsibility of the users to say, hey, something happened here. We should open a ticket. And then if something is still wrong with it, they have to keep pushing the issue. You can't expect the lab team, the operations teams to be asking those questions. So that was a lot of money.
Oh, I could just do the quick math, of course. So was it it sounds like the ticketing system was the root evil here.
Yeah,
right?
nobody opened the
Clearly.
ticket and couldn't tell you why. I mean, there was no, it was too complicated. It was just nobody got around to it. I mean, there were many easier ways to opening tickets now. Like I love the technology around ticketing. I mean, it's super, super easy. You just take out your phone, you scan a QR code or whatever your asset tags are, and it's super fast, right? I love where the technology has gone in that world, but the people still have to do it. They still have to take the 3 seconds to open the ticket.
Right. Well, let's talk about that, because I love what you just said. So like flip it. We went from nightmare to, okay, what's really working? And if it takes literally 3 seconds on your smartphone, like let's blow that up a little bit. What does it look like now in a good scenario?
Yeah, in a good scenario, mobile application is huge for this kind of thing. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. Asset tags are either QR codes or barcodes, something legible. Everything has an asset tag on it, and somebody should be able to scan it. It automatically populates everything you need. So the scientist doesn't have to constantly go in, or whoever in the building shouldn't have to constantly go in and say, this is what it is, this is where it is, this is who owns it, this is the make, model, serial number. They should never have to enter that thing. That's on the back end. They should just have to scan it in, maybe take a picture with their phone, write high level what it is. If it's something like they want to attach a chromatograph or whatever, they can attach the data files and they hit send and it just goes. And then the updating is as easy as whoever gets it on the engineering and tech side, they get it, they look at it, they either have to get a vendor in for it or they're doing it themselves, but it's as easy as chat. Hey, got your ticket. Just want to let you know the vendor's actually in the area. They can be here by 2:00. And it's a chat. It's like a text. It's super easy to communicate. And the scientist is like, awesome, yeah, cool, I'll be here. Or do you need me to be here? I have to leave early. It's making it super easy where it's not a challenge for people. Everybody uses Team and Zooms now, make it super easy for people to use and they'll use it. If you make it where they have to go to their desktop computer, by the time they get there, they're going to forget about it. And that's what happens.
Mhm.
People forget about it, they don't
Mm.
open the ticket.
I didn't realize you oversaw safety, and that's a miss on my part. But could we talk about that for a minute? Because that's been a very
Sure.
common theme and discussion on the show. And it's been usually been in a manufacturing environment, but this is very different. So how do you look at safety and compliance around safety and keep people safe on the campuses?
So it's a big task because one of the biggest things that I've learned coming into the university is the breadth and depth of all the different activities that we do across our state. So it can range from, we have a farming educational facility. So we have students running tractors and faculty, staff running tractors to um, the world's largest 3D printer at our flagship campus. Um, so we're doing a lot of creative, innovative things, and uh, our safety department has to be well in tune to all of those activities happening so that we can help make sure that there's appropriate safety plans in place, all the way down to managing confined space, um, all of that. So that's important. And we also follow the OSHA regulations as well. Um, and then also creating avenues for people to report if things are, if there is an incident that happens on campus, making sure that we're brought into the loop sooner than later so we can be part of the root cause analysis and focusing on prevention so that
Hmm.
accidents don't happen again.
I had no idea that you had an active farm, that you were actually running farming equipment. And did you say the largest 3D printer in the world?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. What are you printing and making with that machine?
They've done a lot. They've actually 3D printed a house
Hmm.
and a boat that actually went out on the water. So it's a lot of innovative, creative, forward-thinking things. So
That is
very
awesome.
exciting.
Wow,
Yeah,
it's like, wow, talk about the diversity of education and experience that you're providing for students in the community.
definitely.
Um, Good run through on safety, Gretchen. Thank you. And I want to jump back to the whole 7 campuses, 9 million square feet, and maybe flip it to, you are very much dialed in. And
Mhm.
what are some of the challenges you're facing? I'm sure some of the listeners would like to know, okay, this occurred because nothing's perfect, of course, and how you managed through that.
Yeah, so I think there's a big challenge that's not unique to the University of Maine system. It's actually a challenge that's throughout higher ed institutions throughout the United States, and that's addressing deferred maintenance. Because as budgets get tight, oftentimes projects pick you, you don't pick them. For example, I remember when I first started at the university, I think within the first week, one of our student centers in one of our large campuses based in Portland had a water pipe burst within the student center that was right in the middle of the bookstore, you know, um,
Of course,
academic
very
affair
strategically
offices.
placed.
Yes, always. They always happen, sometimes in the busiest place. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face is, oftentimes when the projects pick you, it means that you're putting off another project that could address preventative maintenance. And so that is one of our biggest challenges, and we're trying to think of creative solutions to to help address that and get ahead of it. And that can be challenging, especially with, budgets are really tight right now. Funding isn't the same level that we would hope it would be, and enrollment can be a challenge as well. So we're trying to really think of actively find creative solutions to help address deferred maintenance.
Awesome, awesome information and advice. We have a few more things to cover here, and that's one of them is you and I chatted a bit about using data and AI and how that integrates with your role, your team, your company. Could you expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So, one thing that we're really striving to do is stay on top of our trends. And so, we track near misses, we track hazard observations. We are actually, and I'll go ahead and say this, I haven't even covered it with my team just yet, but we are actually starting to get into records of discomfort as well, which is, looking at ergonomic factors. If somebody reports, oh my gosh, I did this yesterday, now my elbow hurts. It's not an injury, right? But reports of discomfort is to look into, aches and pains and things like that that might be associated with the work process. So one thing that we really want to do is we want to address these in real time. I don't know why it happens like this, but it's happened throughout my entire career. But it's, one week we have strains and sprains and, and then the next week we'll have nicks and cuts. And you're like, why are we doing this? And so one thing that I really want to do is I want to address it in real time because I've noticed I did it at one point where I would track our near misses for a month and I would look at hazard observations. And FYI, this is also site specific. I don't do this for the whole company. This is very site specific. We look at near misses, hazard observations, starting to look at reports of discomfort, and we see what's trending. And then we try to put together training that's specific to what we're seeing at the time versus waiting a month later. So initially I was like, oh, every month we'll see what our trend is. And then the next month we'll train on it. That didn't work because we were almost always falling behind and the new thing was going on. So now we've taken it to a weekly basis. And that's worked better. We're also implementing focused auditing. So if they start seeing an issue with, like, let's say, strains and sprains, or you can also take this just into your hazard observations with carts blocking emergency walkways, carts blocking electrical panels. We start doing focused audits. And so what I do is I just put 3 to 5 questions around the issues that we're seeing in that facility into forms and generate a QR code. And I have the facility go plant the QR code around the facility. And then I also send it to our executive leadership team who travels constantly. And I'm like, go scan your QR code whenever you get to whatever facility that you're going and do this inspection for me. And it's really
I love
good.
the way you're making it easy to use. It sounds like you're making it very easy to do.
Listen, if there's one thing that I have understood about human behavior is if you make it as seamless and as easy as possible on other people, they'll do it.
Yep.
They don't want to click too many boxes. They definitely don't want anything paper related. And so we try to do it from their phones and their tablets and stuff, but that you can walk around and just scan this QR code and it takes you to a 3 to 5 questionnaire. And it's based on specifically the hazards that are happening in that facility the week before. And I really, really like this approach because a lot of my executive leadership team doesn't have a huge background in safety or environmental. And so it's really, really fresh eye looking at things. And they'll come back with questions that I'm like, well, you know what? I have no idea why we do that, they're looking at something that I've looked at 100 times and they're like, well, I see them doing this, but why are they doing this over here? And I'm like, well, that's a great question. And it ends up to leading to the corrective action for everything. So I think fresh eyes and eyes that don't see what we do every day lead to some of the best solutions that I have seen.
I would like to ask one more question. And that question is, what advice would you give someone else in a role similar to yours?
For me, it's all about building a network. And I'm sure, again, you probably heard this many times on your podcast. But I really, truly believe that building a network, that's one of the biggest pieces to have. Whether it's, again, mentorship with your career, whether it's a vendor partnership, kind of having multiple vendors in your pocket, kind of for, leveraging their services, but also be a resource to others. Kind of whatever you get, kind of give back to. So for those newer people in the industry, be that resource too, as you have your mentors that are spending time helping you out. I think I in general love to talk to people, love to build those relationships. And like I said, I am not really shy about reaching out to someone across the world. If I can learn something new, schedule 15-minute, half an hour kind of intro call, and then see what the practices are over there, over here, what's the salaries are over there, how are we here. I, always try to do webinars. I get invited to webinars, networking events. IFMA, for example, has been a great resource too. I'm getting more and more so into, events and knowing everyone. But I already can tell that it's such a great group that I wouldn't really be shy to ask questions that if something I need maybe a second opinion on or some kind of a guidance on. So yeah, just build relationships, but the critical thing is to build them before you actually need them. So especially with vendors, not to try to reach out to someone when you're in the process of finding a solution out. Build them kind of seemingly as you go, and then just seamlessly as you go, and then that way you can leverage them when you need them. But again, don't forget to kind of give back. Don't forget to be a resource for others too, or spend time researching things.
And that's a wrap on our special episode celebrating women in facilities. What an inspiring collection of wisdom, strategy, and leadership. From Kimberly's deep dive into integrated systems to Emily's masterclass on navigating regulatory challenges, it's clear that these leaders are not just managing buildings and supply chains, they are building better workplaces and paving the way for future generations. A massive thank you to our incredible guests, Gretchen Catlin, Tatiana Blankenship, Katie Huard, Kimberly Doherty, Emily Gianola, and Agata Gajuska. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your stories with us. If you were motivated by these conversations, I strongly encourage you to explore their full episodes, available now wherever you get your podcasts. Each one offers even more insight into their remarkable careers. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you learned something new today, tell a friend about the show and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. We'll be back next week with another brand new episode of Facility Rockstars.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.